Hello, and welcome to Life in the Bitter Truth. This is the podcast where we seek to understand the deeper, sometimes painful aspects of life and what it all means to us. I'm Vittorio.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, how was your trip?
Gosh, to be actually in the sunshine and then to come back and be around this gloomy. Normally, I'm into the gloomy. I love gloomy weather, but
Okay.
to be out in the sun, actually sweating
Right.
under the sunshine was so amazing.
So a few pina coladas too many, or what's going on?
No, actually, I think we did pretty good. I think we didn't get too ahead of ourselves. I think I drank more coffee than anything, which is normally my vice. But, you know, traveling with family can be interesting. And it wasn't my family. So it's even more interesting for me because you see this, this is my partner's family. You see them in a different way, and you see how they are and how they navigate each other and interact. So that was interesting. But it was my first time staying in a resort, so that was nice.
Okay, resort all inclusive or just a resort?
No, it was just a resort. But yeah, no, it was pretty nice.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Very cool. All right.
I'm back.
What's going on for our talk today?
Well, I chose this topic, and it's essentially talking about the repair phase of relationships and how do we navigate that, and where do we learn these tools, right? Where do they come from? That's kind of what inspired this conversation. It's one that my partner and I often talk about, where, parents, and when we grow up, we often see, both of us come from a divorced families, but what we see is, we see the fighting, we see the chaos, we see the screaming behind the closed doors, but we never see the
screaming in front of the door too.
Exactly. Yeah. But we never see how people come back together.
Right.
And
no,
one thing that I wanted to share that is really, it's funny, and anytime I've shared it with anyone else, they laugh, but I think it's really important where, if my partner and I are in a tiff, the first often thing that breaks that silence or breaks that awkwardness is that either I tell him or he'll tell me. He's the one that started it, so I'll give him the credit. But, he asked me, can I be your friend again? Oh. And I think it's like, it's, you give the eye roll, or you're like,
it lowers the temperature.
It lowers the temperature. Exactly. So important. It's like, what are these little things that we can do to kind of.
Right. When you're, in a heated conversation about whatever the circumstance is, you can come at a person the wrong way. Mm-hmm. I know in my experience, at least with my partner, she doesn't like it if I come at her when temperatures are hot.
Right.
Nobody does, right? Nobody really will receive that well. So I think understanding that first and foremost is the best way to start the repair, and start the conversation. You want to have that conversation sooner than later, so that it and you want to have it in a respectful manner, right? So yeah, absolutely.
And it's funny because we talk a lot about where we learn these things from. Where do we learn emotional regulation, right? Like growing up with you would always tell me, be strong, or like grandma would always tell me, be strong, or don't cry, like big girls don't cry, to kind of help me get over little things that bothered me as a child. But then now as an adult, I feel like I've given myself the permission to be emotional when I need to be.
That was not a trait we were taught as kids either, right? So again, whether there is, softness in parents or whatnot, parents, there's not a playbook for being a parent and teaching one thing or another. We have to realize that they did the best job they could based on the awareness level that they had at the time, right? So it really is something that is not something that we're taught. We're not taught any of those kinds of things. So we're really taking that understanding of the point in time and kind of having to accept it or not accept it. Really, they just didn't have any playbook for
or any language. Like my question to you is, as someone with two other siblings, how did grandma and grandpa teach you how to deal with those type of fights, right? How did you guys deal with
Yeah, we weren't.
conflict in that way.
I think she didn't teach us anything. We, whoever last man standing was the winner. So it was the kind of a thing where if she got fed up with our behavior, it was more so, getting getting a flip flop thrown at you or something thrown at you to stop it or knock it off. But in the end, the conflicts, as long as we didn't injure each other, we seemed to fight solo, or we seemed to fight away from our parents a lot. If my parents just got annoyed at us, we dealt with the consequences of getting either a smack across the face or whatever the circumstances was. Not a criticism of our parents. Again, it's that awareness level that they had at the time. And so we didn't have that. I think growing up for you guys, it was more so understanding a little bit more of what the other kid is going through. Stop picking on your sister. It's not to say that we didn't get some of that as well, but we had your stepbrother, and I know that your stepbrother and my son, your brother, got into fights all the time, right? So my way of always dealing with it is you guys hash it out yourselves. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear any whining or crying.
Deal with it.
Go outside, deal with it, knock it out, whatever it takes. Not leave it, deal with it. And the problem with that is the wife at the time didn't appreciate that, didn't like that, because she always felt that there was a little bit more ganging up on because your brother was bigger and taller and whatnot, but the instigation really came from a lot of times your stepbrother.
Yeah.
So whether grabbing attention or otherwise, and he had his own temperament, just like your brother had his own temperament. So,
and it's hard too to mix families, right? And
sure.
One child is being raised by one person, and the other is being raised by another, and then we have our mother, and he had his father, and it's a lot to blend children.
Blended families have a whole bunch of conflict within itself as well. I mean, there's all kinds of jealousies involved.
Yeah, and I'll say, with my siblings growing up, like Gianni was, my brother was my biggest bully, right? And so I think, and I would come to you and cry to my mom as well, and your guys' biggest piece of advice wasn't, at least from my perspective, I can only speak from mine, but it was always just ignore him.
Sure.
Just ignore him, just avoid him.
Sure.
And looking back now, obviously that's not the best.
We had the same thing, right? When we were kids, we would get into fights with each other or our cousins, because we were always around our cousins. So it was always this, troop of kids that would just roam in the streets, and we were just having a good time, and we would get into fights as well, with each other and whatnot. But one thing I will say is, we could fight with each other, but nobody could fight with us, because that's when you had the parents rolling up, taking off the earrings, rolling up the sleeves, and getting into battle. But it was just, with us, it was just the way we grew up, was deal with it, settle it, resolve it on your own.
But with what tools, though? That's the thing. How do children deal with things and settle things when they don't even have the language to do that? So I understand the boys going outside and pushing each other around and calling each other names or whatever to get it off their chest. That's one thing. But me, if I'm getting bullied by my brother, what I'm told is just deal, essentially just deal with it. No. That's just how Gianni is.
No, I think there were many times where I told him to leave you alone, knock it off, and unfortunately, we're hearing the background noise of what's going on, and then we're saying, knock it off, There were a few times where you guys got sent to your corners, to your rooms, but for the most part, siblings do like to fight with each other.
It did help at the time to have my stepbrother there as like a buffer, because I'll say, for whatever small tiny conflicts there were around us, my stepbrother always backed me up.
Sure.
He would stand in front of my brother, and was always really kind to me, which I appreciated, because I felt like, dang, I need someone in my corner here.
Yeah. Teaching, those conflicts, or teaching the elements of conflict repair, or, dealing with arguments within your siblings and whatnot. I don't even think I had the tools myself. I didn't learn these tools until I was much older.
Right.
How to deal with conflict, especially with somebody who, if you have a partner or whatnot, that is that constantly, or there's tension there. With siblings, sometimes it's just that way. There are siblings you get along with, there are siblings you just don't. So, I think you guys over the years,
and we were the only ones we had, so it was just Gianni and I for a very long time.
Exactly.
And obviously, though we had our stepbrother here, there were weeks when he went with his father, and then there were weeks when we went with our mother, and Johnny always came with me, so we were always together, always. And life was different at this house versus at my mom's house, because we had a little bit more of a lax lifestyle at my mom's. My mom kind of let us roam the house, and it did feel like we ruled the house sometimes, right?
And here, of course, there was nothing but rules.
Rules, exactly, and order.
And order.
And
chaos.
And of course, lots. In order, there's lots of chaos.
Right.
But I feel like when I think about the times that my brother and I bonded, where it wasn't, him bugging the shit out of me. Yes, he did at my mother's house as well. But I think because we had that freedom or that extra air to breathe. At my mom's, I think we got into trouble together because of that, right? So
I have the similar storyline with my sister, who her and I are very similar in age and stuff. So we got into trouble together. Mm-hmm. We got into fights together, but I think sensitivity and whatnot. I think I would not say your brother is probably more sensitive than most people give him credit for. Mm-hmm. And I would say your stepbrother is actually even more sensitive. Mm. So I think you would see one person hurt, would feel the arguments a little bit more, would resonate more with their character traits. And, you comfort, I think the only the takeaways I always had was trying to comfort you guys whenever there was something that was more than, right? But I never spent a whole lot of time really expressing empathy for your internal fighting with your siblings, but more so the battles with, let's say, the ex-wife, right? Because that's where I had to step in quite a bit and deal with whatever that conflict was, and then I would then take that conflict and sit down with her, not really sit down with her, but we would be many times trying to, I would, countless hours trying to figure out why, that tension has to be there, and I didn't understand a lot of what was going on, why she would react so difficultly, to the kids. So that was my always concern, that I was, and of course I didn't want her taking sides and acting a certain way with you guys versus her son. It was just, these sides, these camps.
Growing up in a mixed household is pretty colorful, just in the terms of, like I said earlier, you're bringing different children together that have different life stories. And you always say, even though your brother and you grew up in the same household, you're very different.
Oh, sure.
You're taught the same things and the same kind of moral structure, but you're different people, right?
That's
you
right.
respond differently to different things.
Right.
I even mentioned during Thanksgiving, during our holiday special, of course, my brother and I, what we can bond over is often a lot of trauma, which doesn't always do you well, right? Like, it's not always it's not always a good time to talk about bad things. And,
it perpetuates that victimization mentality, which, it doesn't help anybody. So.
Yeah. I mean, I want us to empower each other. Right. And so you have to be really careful about that. But Gianni and my partner said, like, I don't know what's going on with you guys. Like, I feel like every time you guys are together, it's something's up. And I'm like, well, that's we just have this little thing that I don't know if it comes from childhood conflict or, me being hurt that he treated me a certain way, or maybe him being hurt that I was treated a certain way. I don't know.
Okay.
But all of this to say, how we're treated as children by each other and by our parents and what we're taught, it does have a lasting effect on how we treat people moving forward as adults. So now, being in a committed relationship, it's interesting because I catch myself doing little things where I'm like, okay, where did that come from? Why do I feel the need to raise my voice when it's not necessary?
I think,
am I trying to be so heard, and am I feeling, nervous that he's not hearing me, and am I pulling from something from the past and from a feeling from the past, or where is this coming from? And he asked me, why are you yelling? Why are you raising your voice? What's going on? And I'm like, well, because you're not getting it. And he's like, well, you yelling is not going to make me get it. It's actually going to make me go like step away.
You could chalk that up to passions. You could chalk it up to your lineage, whether it's the Latin side of you or whatnot. But we all argue in a passionate way. We all argue sometimes in a dispassionate way. And sometimes we do want to be heard because we think that it's important to get our point across. And the reality is sometimes we have to take a step back and look at the catalyst or the genesis of an argument, right? What was it that created that tinge in that thing? And it could be as innocuous as not sharing something with your partner and them thinking, why didn't you tell me that already? Or why didn't you share that with me? Or whatever the circumstance might be, right? There's always something. Well, you know what? You could wake up in a bad mood one day and you know what? You're carrying that forward. You're carrying your own emotional state of being into your relationship. That can sometimes cause conflicts,
And it takes so much emotional awareness, self-awareness, whatever you want to call it, to recognize where you're lacking, right? So me, I might be frustrated that this one small thing at work didn't work out today, and I don't have the ability or the emotional maturity to bring it to his attention and be like, hey babe, this really bothered me today. Like,
right.
I don't want to take it out on you. Can we talk about it? But instead I'm carrying around this twang in my voice, or I'm, just huffing and puffing around the house and all these things. And it's like,
men are taught less about emotions and feelings than girls are, right? Boys are, no crying, no expression of sensitivity because you're looked at a little differently. And that's, unfortunately, that's the reality in which I grew up in. I probably carried that legacy down to my son. I carried it down certainly to you and to your sister and to my stepson. I certainly did all that because it was something I not necessarily was taught to my parents, taught from my parents, but I think that was something that was ingrained in my construct of how I viewed society. You have to be strong, right?
I mean, grandma tells me that all the time. Right. If I'm, stressed about something at work or whatever, or, she's asking me about something that's going on with my health or mental health, whatever. And she's just like, well, just be strong. Okay. Be strong. That's all she's telling me in her little accent. And I'm like, grandma, I am a walking testament to being strong. I'm here like talking to you now about this.
I think she does that because the reality is you don't, the way they grew up, the way I grew up, there's no time for feels. There's no time for that because there's so much to do in life, right? So, but what I say, when I say that, it's also difficult because what you say, if you're never connecting with your feelings, right? My partner says, if you don't connect with your feelings, you bury that under the rug. And it will manifest itself in other ways, in health ways, physically, mentally, so those are the kinds of things. So it's very important that you deal with those feelings, but not let it consume, which a lot of people do. A lot of young people do today is, from at least what I'm hearing is, their feelings are all consuming and therefore they can't get past things.
Well, they just don't know how to cope. No one has taught them how to cope with these really tough things that people are experiencing, that people experience in life as members of society. Like, I've told my partner Jacob often, the joy that you experience, the happiness, the excitement, all those feelings are so important, but so are the other ones.
Right,
and you have to meet them the same way.
We
can. You're allowed to be angry about something that is going on in your life. You're allowed to be disappointed at something that's happening at work.
Absolutely.
But how do we funnel those and process them out so they don't fester?
Simply put, you can't let it fester to the point where it consumes you and therefore then takes precedent over happiness, right? Over the opportunities that are in front of you, as opposed to dwelling on that piece that just happened, which is now the past, right? I'm not saying don't deal with it so that you can handle it better next time, but don't let it take such a presence in your existence that you can't function for the next day or two, which there are people like that.
Oh my God, I could be in it for weeks if I allow myself.
And you know what? That's just not healthy. We talk about our legacy as children and what we consume, or what our parents leave us with, and those experiences we have do transcend into adulthood. And we all know this, right? This is nothing new that that many people haven't already spoken about, but there's a reality here. And you know, whether it's you, whether it's your boyfriend, whether it's me, whether it's you know, my girlfriend, it's a question of how do we not let that legacy consume us, and where we can't break those chains, right? That's the whole mechanism of and unfortunately we repeat those things, and in fighting or arguing or discussions, it creeps up, whether it's insecurities, whether it's you know whatever the circumstance might be, it does. The question is, how do we deal with it in an argument, right?
Can you think of like a specific time in, I mean, you can use me as an example,
Sure.
or just in general with your children, that like there would have been a really good moment or time that you could have taught us something, but maybe you didn't have the words or the capacity to do that? And I can give you an example.
Sure.
A couple of months ago, you know, I was sitting with my grandmother, and she was sharing with me that a really important member in our family, this is, you know, great generation, had taken their own life in Cuba.
Oh, okay.
And so, you know, I had never seen my grandma cry until this moment where she was sharing this with me, an important person in her life. And so, you know, she said, we just didn't talk about those things.
That's right.
We just wrote it off as she's sick and she just needed to do that. And then we move on. And I asked her, well, right, that's it right there, right? Where we didn't, whether it was your mother or
we blew it underneath the carpet,
we just put it under the rug. And so now when my grandma's asking me, you know, wanting to learn about my emotions and kind of some of the things that I've experienced, you know, she's like, but why are you like this? What, you know, in her way, right?
Sure.
I know she means it, and it's her own way of giving me that tenderness that I need. But, you know, her trying to understand it. And I'm wondering, you know, if, just as an example, that moment right there, right, where before her, generations before her, 2 generations before her, where someone made that decision, the family could have tried to figure it out.
You know what?
I don't know. Like, there's all these moments in life where, you know, I think in my mind, dang, is this a moment where I could have taught my sister something, and I chose not to take that moment?
Again, it's the awareness that an individual has at the time that they're experiencing something. So, you know, they did back then as I did raising you, as my mother did. You know, it was our awareness at that time, right? So we can't criticize. You can't criticize me because that was my awareness at the time, right? I always thought of myself as somebody who was very fortunate. My parents were good parents, very loving. They didn't show a lot of emotional love. You know, they didn't express the word "I love you." It was a generational thing potentially. I knew, so having kids myself, I knew that it was important for me to use that word all the time. You said
it all the time.
That's right, because so that's how I
so
broke.
Much so that, like, sorry to interrupt you, but so much so that, you know, you would tell us, "I love you," or we would say, "I love you, Dad," and you would say, "I love you too," right? So you saying "I love you," too, we would tell our mom, "I love you," and she would say, "I love you." And then we would say, "But you're not saying it like Dad. You're not saying I love you too. You have to say it like Dad. I love you also."
Right.
And it's like that mutual exchange of love that we were like, we didn't know why we wanted so badly for our mom to say it a certain way. Didn't mean she didn't love us any less because she didn't say it the same way my dad said it, but that stuck in our brains.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So there's never like a day that we could go and say, "Oh, our parents didn't tell us that they loved us," because God, you guys did.
I always knew my parents did love me. Of course I did, because they did it in action, not words. But I think when we speak about what was lacking, is sometimes as an individual, you want to hear it, right? You want to hear it from your partner. You want to hear it from your parents. So my way of changing, which what I thought was very good parents, was just tweaking elements of what I thought I needed and what I wanted to do for my kids, was express. It was to be more verbally expressive, not just by my levels of consistency in which I said, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to say something, I'm going to do it, right?
Right.
But it was that. I think
So that verbal expression was something you noticed you didn't get.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
even that consistency that you're saying, where your parents showed up for you
Sure.
in very specific ways, you wanted to do that.
But-
And I think you've done that so well.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, showing up was very different for me than it was for my parents. They didn't show up for games. Like parents today. Like you as an example, I went to the baseball games. I went to the band events, and I remember having to skateboard to the baseball field and skateboard home, and because my parents were busy, and didn't hurt me, didn't offend me, didn't make me upset, or it was part of how I was raised. So the only difference is parents today, and even when I was raising you guys, it's more, there's more a connection where you want to be part of your kid's existence. Some parents take it to the nth degree. Some parents do more what I did, go to every event, and again, those, when I said the nth degree, it's like they are teen parents, and they're doing everything, and they're consummate cheerleaders, and that's all fine. It's there's no one recipe that is successful for raising good kids, because again, or strong, healthy, mature individuals, because you can be in the same household, give your kids the exact same level of attention and love and care, they turn out completely opposite.
Right.
So that's just unfortunately what it is. And that, again, our how we grow up does translate into how we interact with other people.
Right.
Conflicts,
And I know, it's interesting because I feel like my platonic relationships with friends, manifest differently than my romantic relationships, for example, where, in dealing with, different traumatic romantic relationships, with fucking being with assholes and shit like that, just not choosing well, right? Not having that self-love and that self-awareness I needed at the time. It's interesting because those types of relationships where I was caught in this kind of vicious cycle of choosing wrong and also not knowing how to deal with conflict, that just was a horrible recipe for disaster.
So break down one of those conflicts as an example.
I think the best one that I can say, I had a partner a few years ago that, when we fought, it was aggressive. It was lots of yelling, lots of me like being so shocked by that, right? And it reminded me of like when your parent is yelling at you, like you feel that disappointment, you feel that like, oh my God, like, you hate yourself because it's such a horrible feeling to be yelled at a certain way, right? And so when you're being yelled at and you're always the problem and you're always, the other person can't take accountability, what are you going to do? You're going to, out of habit and maybe manipulation, just have that negative self-talk about yourself, right? And that's kind of how it manifested. So it came to a point where I was so disappointed, I was so unhappy that I just let it drag on for so long. And then it just finally hit me like, we haven't talked in weeks. Right. We're together, but we're not together. Right. I'm out of this.
So it's by default, an unhealthy relationship.
But it's the fact that I didn't have that confidence to deal with the conflict or possibly walk away a year and a half earlier, right?
Sure.
When I knew it was bad, or I knew that he didn't know how to deal with conflict. Sure. And so it kind of caught up to me where I'm like, okay, I'm not good at telling you how I feel because I don't want to be yelled at and I just don't want to fight or deal with it. So I started avoiding it. Sure. And then what did I do? Instead of trying to get him to see what he was doing or get him to understand my perspective, I just left. Right. So that avoidant behavior, or that avoidant decision, he asked me, what the fuck, where is this coming from?
Right.
I thought everything was great. And I'm like, yeah, it was great because I didn't say anything.
Yeah, the conversation, unfortunately, you never dealt with the issues at hand.
Exactly. Right? And I was just afraid to. It was weird to not be heard.
Sure.
And I see the difference now.
Sure.
So immensely being in a relationship that, I do feel heard. Okay. He does give me the mic. Okay. He lets me go on and on and on for hours if I need to, right?
Wow.
I mean, it doesn't happen all the time.
It becomes an issue of, you can find a partner that you can address conflict easily, because conflicts are there. They don't have to be there, but they arise for whatever reason. Again, it's emotional that day, whatever someone's feeling can create something. But as long as you have an open dialogue of conversation, anything can be resolved, right? As long as two people are willing to get there, right?
And it was something similar that my current partner expressed in the past as well, where him and other people didn't know how to deal with conflict, so you just try to forget about it, and then resentment builds for years, and then it's like, okay, well, what else is there? Because we haven't established that good foundation of trust and rebuilding and all these things. And we even ask each other if we do have a tip or something. We're like, what did we do wrong there? How can we go back and kind of see that little moment that could have changed everything, right?
Sure.
And so at least we have that self-awareness to look back and say, okay. And it's kind of hard when you're in the conflict to see these things, because you have that tunnel vision. But when you do see it and we're in it, and I'm like, both of us, recognize that, we're like, holy shit, we totally could have ended this like 30 minutes ago, but here we are.
It's a question about being heard, understood. An apology is great. If it's supported by a true understanding of why the other person was hurt, right? And sometimes it does take a lot longer for the other person to understand why what you did per se or whatever hurt them, right? And levels of sensitivity create dynamics, right? So I am less sensitive, than my partner is, where we are on opposing spectrums, right? Where something that I may do, because I'm, not an innocent person, might be taken by her as a catastrophic event for her feelings. And I might be dumbfounded at why that is. But the reality is we are different people with different pain points, where I may not feel something, certainly not at her level, but something that I may do may cause her to be physically sick, and she'll need that time.
Right.
And I may sit back going, what the hell did I do? Why? But it really is learning and understanding your partner's degrees, right? Of feels, and so it's important to sometimes take a step back. And it's, though you're aware, even in a conflict or an argument, that moment that you're dealing with it, you may not even remember. Take a pause, take a beat, to go back and say, oh shit, this is something that she's feeling.
Right.
And that's something that is a learned response. You have to learn it.
It is learned. And that's crazy you say that, because I feel like I'm so similar to your partner in the sense that, like, any little thing, I always tell my boyfriend Jacob, like, just imagine me as like a little bird in your hand. I'm just a little thing,
right? A
little bunny, whatever, because, I've been so gifted in this relationship where I am loved the way I deserve and the way that I need and want. And so anytime, and it's hard because sometimes we're having a bad day and our tone shifts and I'm like, why did you talk to me like that? Right. And he's just like, what? Like he has no freaking, he doesn't even know. And
that's less about him, more about you.
Exactly. And so it's like, having to take a step back and, whether it's us coming together and him saying it wasn't my intention and me saying,
no one has an intention. No one has an intention to hurt.
You hope so.
Generally, most people don't have.
I mean, if you're in a good,
going to intent to hurt, exactly.
If you're in a good and loving relationship, right, that is the way it should be. I can't say I've always been in those, so I know it's not his intention to hurt me, and sometimes he's just tired, or sometimes he's busy or doing something, and I'm like just like a little monkey there on his back trying to, again, grab at him or whatever.
Not him, you.
Exactly. I know.
You having to deal with what you're feeling so that it doesn't become this overriding burden of emotional whatever,
Yeah. And that sometimes it's, these little moments of tone or raising your voice or dumb little comments here and there. most people, I'm sure, can just, you're dumb, and then move
blow
on.
it off, right?
And me, I'm like,
okay,
what?
well,
You know? And that's just the person that is true. Like I am, the deeply emotionally intuitive person that
right,
I am.
right. Well,
I am very soft. This thing goes very deep, and it's gotten me in a lot of trouble, and it's gotten me in a lot of great levels in terms of my own self. But it does take lots of regulation.
Sure. In an argument, you could be, or not even an argument. Let's say you are being sarcastic, right? Sarcasm is just that. It's a hostile act because you're unwilling to be expressing exactly how you feel about an issue rather than do that.
Yeah, it's not good intention.
It's not good intention, right? So, when they say sarcasm, oh, I was only kidding, no, actually not. Sometimes you're not really kidding because sarcasm is just that. You're not really kidding. You're actually making a statement by being or saying those kinds of things. And unfortunately, you have one partner that might be more intuitive, more tuned into emotions than the other partner. And I can certainly say that about my relationship. I mean, she's dialed in right in there on her emotions. She knows exactly how she feels, when she feels it, how she feels it, everything. Where I'm just not that in tuned because, I may say something, doesn't affect me that way. But
or maybe you've just been taught to suppress.
That's a very good observation. I probably was taught to suppress a lot more. But you know what?
Because you're more emotional now in your later life than you ever were as when I was a child.
Sure.
Or even as a teenager, right? Like, I never ever saw, it's sad to say, like, I never really saw joy in you in the way that I do now, right?
Yeah.
So now in your later life, as you've grown, found a better relationship, right? Sure. Have made all these points of progress. Now you're able to kind of, spread yourself out a little bit better, whatever. But it's the fact that, like, I think now you have an even better understanding of these things.
Well, it's going back to some of our front end conversation. What you guys didn't see, quite frankly, you guys may have seen more of the more of the arguing. You didn't see it with your mother because you guys were too small, right? But with my second wife, you saw more of it because you guys were a little bit older and you guys got to see it. So, conflicts, despite how many times one wants to resolve it and feel, there's a whole bunch of volcanoes erupting through that. And what you guys saw was the volcanoes. Not the lava forming, which is the settlement of the fire.
Right.
And a lot of it was trying to understand, and I failed every single time because I just, I didn't do a good job of understanding the depth of her angst or whatever
Very
it was.
Emotional as well.
Yeah, and I also was extremely busy at work, so that's not an excuse at all because you should always take your your family first, right? But those are these elements that sometimes another person isn't good either at arguing, right? So unfair fighting is an important part of understanding that when having a conflict. Fair fighting is important. When I say that, it's like, a lot of people don't do active listening. They're listening to them and they're firing off
and they're ready with a response.
And boom, they're ready with the response because that's what they're thinking. They're thinking, what is the response I need to give to this person, as opposed to sitting back and trying to listen to whatever's being expressed and that emotion. And you know what? You have to constantly work on that muscle, that emotional muscle. It's just not easy. So when you guys never saw necessarily the resolution other than one day they're fighting, the next day they're not, or one day they're fighting and no one's it's quiet in the house.
Yeah, no one's silent treatment is such a thing.
The silent treatment was a thing. It is a thing.
Yeah, and there was one time that Jacob told me, like, us being silent, us not saying anything, it says way more.
Sure.
And, I don't want us to just sit here in silence. It makes it so much worse.
It's awkward.
Right?
Sure.
It's awkward. And it's like, what's really important? Like, when we get down to it, I love you. I appreciate you. Never mean to hurt you. Okay, how can we move forward?
Well, it's changing. It's understanding not the, so love is there, fine. So, but the behavior cannot be a consistent pattern, because then it doesn't, no one's taking the steps to fix things, right? So that's part of the problem, right? You could have an argument with your partner, but if it's the same old argument that the other person's expressing, what steps are you doing to help repair that?
Right.
Because remember, every argument is a learning opportunity for each of you. Whether you're in the wrong or in the right, it doesn't make a difference, because no one loses their birthday when they have to apologize. I didn't make that up. That's my partner always saying that to me. Your birthday's gonna come around. You're still gonna get, to celebrate it.
I'm still gonna make you your coffee.
It's okay to apologize.
Yeah.
The depth of that apology is only based on the level of understanding of what the conflict was and what you are doing wrong and what you're willing to do to repair.
Right.
So that there is some harmony and consistency. And not every person, there's no right or wrong, right? So it's a question of, let me redress it. Each person in the argument, whether one person did the infraction, both people have takeaways. And that takeaway is how to better understand your partner, and the willingness to do that. So, and
also based on what bothers them, right? And, I think it's important to say that a lot of people don't have the having self-awareness, knowing your emotions, being emotionally in tune with yourself. That's a privilege, because a lot of people don't even get to tap into that. A lot of people don't have the time to, or they're busy at work, or it's too much to do that. So me, for the past 10 to 15 years, I've been on and off in therapy throughout that. Spent a lot of money trying to understand myself and my story. And I think, it's a privilege to say that I was able to do that. And a lot of people don't get to do that. So when I throw out certain words, or, when I have a certain approach and my partner's like, where does that come from? How did you learn that? There's a lot of teaching back and forth that we have to do, a lot of unlearning together, but a lot of readdressing and teaching that we have to do, where might not know all the answers, but at least this is, just like you say, there's not a book you can read. There's not a book that we can read to have the best relationship that is as honest and sacred as possible. But maybe we can try to find the tools to kind of put that together.
Well, the most important part is the willingness to sit back and interpret what took place and learn from those things and make effective change, right? So I was never a big proponent of therapy. Never. I mean, until I think when I got divorced the second time, I think I took that in earnest, and I said, what are the conflicts that we had, and what were the things that I did to perpetuate them, create them? Why was I not empathetic to what the other person was experiencing? There are times where, therapy gives you a clarity in saying that, okay, these are the steps that I did, these are the things that I do, and you can make tweaks if you choose to. Other times, talking it out with somebody that doesn't know you, they're picking up on these nuances. So, of course, therapy now has become, it's an important part of your health. Whether it's, you go to the doctor for your physical health, you have to sometimes go to a doctor for mental health. And you know what? You don't have to go to a therapist as much as you have to be able and willing to talk about your feelings. It could be with your partner.
That muscle,
It could be with your brother. You and I have talked endlessly over the years about your feelings. I've shared with you mine. I've given you nothing but advice, and whether you've taken them or not, it's just at least it's provided you an opportunity to be expressive. And I do that with your sister. I do it with your brother. Your brother and I have had long conversations about feelings, regrets, and all of these emotions that come about. So again,
and sometimes even with advice, even if with long conversations, it taps into these foundational feelings that we're taught often as children, where it's that self-confidence, it's that self-love. Like, these things are very difficult to teach. Right? They're not intrinsic. We learn them over time. And so, I can say confidently that for years I lacked so much of that.
Which to me is shocking that you say that, because you were always propped up. You were always, I mean, that was those were things that I always remembered. Be strong. You're a female. You can do anything you want in life, right? I was propped up roughly the same way. I exude confidence. Not because I'm a tall person, not at all. I'm not a big person, but there are elements of my character that provide me with a level of confidence. And I thought that's the way I learned it. I didn't learn it from my parents. There was nothing that my parents did or whatever other than the fact, don't let anybody bully you. So I took that to the nth degree and said, you know what, I'm going to be this person, despite maybe some limitations I mentally had. I'm going to be confident and strong with who I am, and I carry that forward in my relationships. At least I think I have. So it's kind of surprising you say that you lacked confidence.
And self-love as well, or just that self-awareness or inner strength. And I can say the same thing about my brother as well. He shared very similar things with me, and it's hard because these things, someone can tell you you're amazing and you're great all you want.
Sure.
But it's really dependent on you and your own grasp of yourself to believe it.
Sure.
So that's obviously very difficult. I think, a lot of people just deal with so much throughout their life. And I remember a time, I don't know if it was in high school or what, but I had shared with you, Dad, I think, with the language I have, I think I'm depressed. I think I don't want to get out of bed. And you had told me, you're not depressed. Like, you have nothing to be depressed about. And
I've said that many times to you. What do you have to be depressed about, right?
And it was interesting because it wasn't until you were getting divorced. I remember you calling me, and I was still living at one of my old houses with my mom, and you told me, I see what you're saying now.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and I thought that was really it was so affirming, and it sucked that it had to take a couple of years for you to really see me, but you were upset, and it made me humanize you a little bit more. Because when you're
humanize me.
and when you're growing up as a child, your parents are your saints, right? They're perfect in their image and all this stuff, and we don't get to see them as soft, tender beings until they're much older, unfortunately. But you guys do act very human in very human ways.
We're human.
Angry, and in your reactions and all this stuff.
Right.
And so it takes, as an adult now, almost 30 years old, seeing and throughout whatever I've experienced in my life, having to come to terms with different things, and saying, my parents, this was their first time on this earth as well.
There you go.
Did they teach me how to be as emotionally, aware as maybe I could have been? Maybe not, but did their parents do that for them?
Right.
Definitely not.
Right. So we talk about, when we talk about, conflicts with our parents or whatnot, setting boundaries are an important part of addressing conflict when you don't get resolution. Did I say that right? So, boundaries are an important part of just that. It's saying to the other person, some things I will be accepting of and other things I won't. And this is the line that I'm drawing in the sand. You've had to do that. You've had to do it. And I think it's been beneficial. It's allowed you now to have a different perspective of that relationship, if you want to share about that. It's, your mother, that's where the boundaries that you set seem to be benefiting you, and you've lightened up. You've understood that your mother, just like you, feels, and she can't be held accountable for what she just didn't know, because you don't. Again, you want to steer away from that concept of victimhood, because if you do, you're never going to take an opportunity to rise above that, right?
I mean, and it's something that, my partner has posed to me is, what are you looking for there? Mm-hmm. What are you looking for in this relationship with your mother, your father, your every person? Because, God, the universe, whoever you believe in, I believe in God. So I can say that, God puts these people in our life for very specific reasons.
Sure.
And, I'll always, have said over time, like I've collected mothers throughout my life, mm-hmm. women that I look up to, that I've leaned on, that love me in a motherly way. And I'm lucky to say that I have numerous of them.
Sure.
And it's the fact that, every one of them gives me a little something, and all accumulating into one makes me feel like that I have that, right?
Right.
And so, when I think about...
But you're looking for more than that. You're looking for your mother to play that primary role.
Of course. And if I'm in the situation that I am, where I feel like she can't, my mom, she comes from a generation and a culture that, no matter what, you need to bow down to your parents, mm-hmm. because they are your parents, and, they don't make mistakes, and they don't apologize and all these things. And, and also you and your children need to be like this. And you need to grow up in the same house, and you need to never leave. And, how dare you have a life outside of this family? And it's hard because, my mom struggles with her siblings, and, what they're not doing for her parents. And it's like, you guys are just in this toxic, weird cycle all together.
The conflicts, that's within that family.
Right.
Sure.
And it shows up in my own relationship with my mom, because, she wants me, my mother, I've always said, is the most amazing daughter. Mm-hmm. She's gone above and beyond for her parents. Sure. And that's a sacrifice, right? To be an amazing daughter is a sacrifice. To give so much of your life to take care of your sick parents is a sacrifice, because you have to give up other things, maybe taking care of your own children, or tending to your own relationships.
Well, there has to be a balance, because I think if you can, what we tend to do sometimes as individuals is we tend to take the path of least resistance. Mm-hmm. And maybe in that particular case that you're talking about, is that your mother's path is easier just to deal with her father, mm-hmm. than it is to deal with other things. I'm not mm-hmm. saying that's the case, but we do that as humans. Mm-hmm. We take the path of least resistance sometimes, because it's easier on us physically and mentally.
Right.
So, can't overly criticize one person's approach. Not this, you just have to sit back and try to be in their shoes, mm-hmm. walk in their steps. It's a little tough.
And be that empathetic person that I feel like I've always been. And empathy is also a gift, and it's also something that a lot of people do not have. And so, that's kept me in this cycle with her, where I over empathize for her, so I make excuses for her, and I write it off as other things, when really it's just, you chose certain things, and it has everything we do has consequences, and I know that better than anyone. And looking forward, thinking about how my partner posed it to me is, what do you need from her? What do you need, and what can you get?
Right.
And how do we make that work for our life, your life?
Sure.
And so that's kind of the journey that I'm on now with my mother and many family members.
And it's working. It's working slowly, but it's working.
It's not perfect all the time.
Sure.
And sometimes I have to continue to reestablish the boundary. And I think that's the hardest part, is reestablishing the boundary and not letting people step over it.
Sure.
As a yes person, as a people pleaser, as all these things, I have a soft spot for my mother, and, for this relationship that I crave for her, to have with her so badly, that we just have never had.
Right.
So in that way, I need to be really careful to not allow these things to perpetuate.
Sure, of course. You don't want that, because you don't want to have you don't want to carry that legacy forward, right? So
and you also don't want it to seep its way out into other relationships of yours.
Sure. It's funny. It's funny, relationships as it is, communication, as we all know this, this isn't new information, but communication is the singular most important part that two individuals that are in a relationship need to have, right? A willingness to listen, mm-hmm. share, mm-hmm. digest, and find that ground, that connective ground where they move their lives forward, or that relationship forward, right? So in my example, my relationship, I am the lesser of the two of us in the sense of empathy, right? Um, she has it at levels that I cannot comprehend. And so I sit back and I say, "Ooh, maybe I should take a different approach," because but it's who I am as an individual. That's who she is as an individual. So you could try and emulate another person all you want. In the end, you're still you. You can make tweaks, and that's all that's important. No one wants to change the other person. What we want to do is we want to have a full understanding that they understand our needs and are willing to, again, take a beat when it's necessary to sit and listen to what our needs are,
and also give you grace when you don't, when
absolutely.
you're not tending, when things are not perfect, because life can throw you curveballs all the time, and you have to consistently give your partner that grace. And maybe you didn't receive as a child, right? Where,
But what's important, you're not a mind reader. Your partner's not a mind reader. You have to be expressive of what your needs are. Whether, hey, sweetheart, I just need you to tell me everything's going to be okay. And you can't have this expectation that they should know, they should be able to read the room. No, you know what? That's nonsense, because the reality is,
it also just doesn't hurt to talk about whatever.
Need to be able to express that need you have, because again, your partner can't be held accountable for not knowing what they don't know, and how, because they're not in your skin.
Right.
So, in arguing, or having conversation or apologies, is an apology enough? Right? Is saying sorry, I'm sorry, enough? Why do we have to keep going on about this? You could certainly convey your feelings. I apologize. What more do you want? Right? Sometimes an apology, though you want it to be sincere, doesn't mean that you understand why you're apologizing. So that's an important thing as well, and that's making sure that your partner is heard, understood, and that you fully acknowledge what took place. Otherwise, you can't move it to the next level. You can't get past it, and that's sometimes a little difficult to do when you're sometimes blocked by something. So, I don't know how apologies work with others, but I know that for me, if my partner is feeling something, I'm so sorry about that. You're feeling this way. It's important. If I'm the culprit of what's going on, you want to make sure that, and I haven't been always successful, but I'm trying to understand what they're experiencing, so you can help them, or they can walk it through, talk it through. So my partner is very good at communication, very good at sitting down and expressing what she does and doesn't like. Where, on the flip side of that, but goes back to my old nature, my old legacy is, the way I grew up, brush it underneath the carpet. So she does not like that mentality or that approach to things. So she drags, and I mean that sincerely, drags it out of me sometimes. And it can be frustrating for her, because shouldn't be that much work, right? And that's the work that I have to do to continue to be open in that dialogue.
It doesn't have that
so it doesn't have that long, lingering approach to or resolution. So those are the tough parts. So.
Yeah. Well, you're right. There is no playbook, and it's hard. I wish there was, because my partner and I, we always talk like, how could we do it better, or and I always tell him it's the intention, or it's the fact that we want to be better than the way we grew up. We don't want to end up divorced like our parents. We want this to work. We love each other, and it's having that awareness, and I think that's a good start.
Right. Again, so it's the principal thing here is, as we deal with childhood experiences that bring us into adulthood, it's that pure understanding and reflection of not wanting to bring that legacy into your relationships. You want to be able to break those chains, whatever they might be, and so that you don't keep perpetuating it and on and on and on repetitively. I don't think my parents ever had that skill set. I think they did at some level. I can't completely discount it or dismiss it, but I think that the sophistication has just become more and more, where we're more aware And people are more expressive today than they ever have before. So
True.
Yeah. So
well, with all that said, we can continue on with
good conversation
our segment, which is questions I always wanted to ask you. And this week I have a really funky, fun question for you. I mean, I think it has
funky and fun, huh?
Funky and fun. Those are my words for today. But I think it has a lot to do with this topic as well, which, you know, I mean, I live here, so he knows this, but I am going to be moving out into...
What? When? Oh my God, it's great.
I'm going to be moving out soon with my partner. We found a really great apartment, so God willing, it works out. We should be able to move in by next week.
Wow, okay. Good stuff.
My question for you is, what advice do you have for young couples moving in with each other, which, mind you, you know, when I lived at my mom's, there was very, very, very strict rules of, you know, I can't even watching a movie with him on the couch, and if I'm falling asleep, well, he's got to go, because if you're already falling asleep, it's you know, he needs to leave already. I'm like, girl, it's 7 and I'm 7 and I'm falling asleep because I'm tired and I'm comfortable and I'm warm. Anyway,
rules.
Right.
Okay.
My mom is very old school in the fact that she believes, you know, that you need to be married before you move in together.
Okay, I understand.
Look, everyone thinks differently. It's not really our path right now. But my question to you is, what advice do you have for young couples moving into, and I know, you know, my brother and his long-term partner are now living together, and it's a different dynamic for them, and it's fun, and it's allows them to be together in a deeper way and learn each other's weird and funny quirks.
There's only one simple word.
What?
Patience.
Patience.
Because there's a reality that you not living, when you live with another person, right? They bring their way.
Right.
You bring your way. You've got to find that happy medium where, you know, either you accept that way or he accepts your way. So, you know, and that's an important thing. It's called patience, because you know, you throwing your clothes on the floor. I'm not saying you specifically, but let's say he does that. You know, that's a rule right off the bat. No, in the hamper. Leaving dishes in the sink are a big thing for me. Hate them. I see them in there, and I want to shoot the person that has left the sink. And the one that's, I mean, your younger sister does it, you know, consistently. Maybe she does it to bug me. I don't know. But that's more my fault than it is her fault, because I'm not telling her, stop what you're doing, get your ass in the kitchen and wash those dishes. But again, that goes back to the best advice is be patient with each other, because there's going to be parts and quirks and situations, and it's going to, moving into a new place, be it a house or apartment, there are conflicts that are going to come up, because you may want things a certain way, and he doesn't understand why you want it that way, and so you may need to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
If he's more easygoing, then so be it. I am. You know, I don't like a lot of tchotchkes all over the house. So, my partner loves all that stuff. I talked about it in another podcast. Her home is incredibly warm and inviting and whatnot. Mine is more sterile, not so inviting. I kind of like it that way. I like the cleanness of it all, and everything, you know, everything in its place. You would think everything's in its place, but it really isn't. I have a messy house, but and you know, I've got to adapt to it. So I'm a different. When I'm with her in her home, in her space, you know, I adapt to her needs and her demands, her way of doing things. She does the same thing with me.
Right.
Bridging those things two together one day, God willing, will be interesting.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny that you say that we have our little quirks, or, you know, and I thought about it this morning when I saw, you know, a towel on my bed. You know, I'm moving things around and everything like that, and I'm thinking in my mind, oh my God, it's a wet towel. Oh, that irks me. And I touch it and it's dry, and I'm like, okay. So is that something that like would bother me in the future if there's a wet towel on the bed? Little stupid things but it does.
It's going to be everything from the toothpaste being grabbed in the center as opposed from the bottom.
Oh my God.
Toothbrush not being put away.
Right.
Or shaving over the sink and not cleaning the sink. I can go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
So you're gonna clean better, or he's gonna clean better than you are.
Yeah.
And
are there certain things that I don't want to clean? Like I told him, all bets are off. I don't want to clean floors.
So it's going to be
hate cleaning the floors.
It's going to be a mediation of decisions and tasks that you guys are going to have to come up with, and he does this, you do that, and you're just going to have to accept how he does it. Right. Otherwise, do it your damn self.
Yeah, and don't complain.
No, that's just the reality.
Patience.
So
okay,
good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
good response. I'll take that.
Good. I'm glad. Well, thank you so much for listening to us this week. This is Life and the Bitter Truth, and we are available on all podcast platforms, YouTube as well. And please like us, subscribe to us, comment, all the things that follow with that, and please continue to support us. We definitely want it. We definitely enjoy what we're doing and sharing things that come up. So please. Did you have any comments about
any plugs?
Any plugs? I know that you wanted to plug.
See. I'd love to plug our vintage shop in Monrovia, California. Till Death Vintage and Guarita Vintage. We're in there. We're doing the damn thing. We have sales often, and it's really fun. We love vintage. We love antiques. We love tchotchkes. Okay, tchotchkes. So if you're into that,
great,
come on down.
Again, thank you, and we'll see you next week. Bye.